Jaya Gopi Janna Balabha Giribhara Dhari Yashodanandana Prajajana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Bhalabha Giribhara Dhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Parivrajagacharya Ashtotar Shatashi Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Nitai Gaura Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shishiguru and Shiguranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 11, General History, Chapter 7. Lord Krishna instructs Uddhava, text number 29. Janeshu dahya maneshu kamaloba davaknina natapya se yena mukto gangabha sta iva dvipa janeshu dahyamaneshu kamaloba davaknina natapyaseknina mukto gangabhasta iva dvipa janeshu dahyamaneshu kamaloba davaknina natapyaseknina mukto Ganga bhasta iva dvipa. Please chant, Prabhu. Janeshu dahyamaneshu kamalobha dabaknina natapasyangnina mukto gangabhasti sta iva dvipa. Janeshu, O people, dahyamaneshu, even while they are burning, kama, of lust, lobha, and greed, dava aknina, in the forest fire, natapyase, you're not burned, aknina, from the fire, muktaha, free, Ganga ambaha, in the water of the Ganga, sta, standing, iva, as if, dvipaha, an elephant. Translation and purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Although all people within the material world are burning in the grave forest fire of lust and greed, you remain free and are not burned by that fire. You're like an elephant who takes shelter from the forest fire by standing within the water of the Ganges River. Purport. The natural result of transcendental bliss is described in this verse. The young Brahmana was physically very attractive, and his senses were full of potency for material enjoyment, yet he was not at all affected by material lust. This position is called mukti, or liberation. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur explained that within the Ganges flow great currents of water capable of extinguishing a blazing fire. If an elephant maddened by sex desire stands within the Ganges, its powerful cooling currents extinguish his lust. The elephant becomes pacified, and the elephant becomes pacified. Similarly, ordinary human beings trapped in the cycle of birth and death are constantly harassed by the enemies of lust and greed, which never allow the mind to be completely peaceful. But if, following the example of the elephant, one situates oneself within the cooling wave of transcendental bliss, then all material desire will soon be extinguished, and one will become shanta, or peaceful. As described in Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ataeva Shanta. Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya 19.149. Thus, everyone should take to the movement of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and cleanse himself in the cooling waters of Krishna consciousness, our real eternal consciousness. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Ummilitam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Romapaswami Iti Namine. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirveshesha Shunyavadi Pashatyade Shatarine. Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripasindu Vyevacha Patitanam Pavanevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha. just you and me, Vaishnava Sevananda Prabhu. Well, Krishna Archana should come very soon. Or that my class is not very popular. No, actually, we have to support and give prayers to Sri Vallabha's family, who is going to some hard times. So he's going to New York to support his family. So, and Hari Bhakti Prabhu is driving him to the airport. So that's, otherwise, it's the three of us. Krishna Archana is coming. Well, Krishna is there. Shrimati Radharani, Lord Chaitanya, Lord Jagannath. Narada Muni must be someplace around, and Lord Brahma and Super Soul. Okay. So, yeah, so this is a very, the beginning of this is a very important important subject matter in the Bhagavatam that is quite often recommended that we study very careful sadhakas, that are trying to understand the process of Krishna consciousness as, the purifying method to become free or liberated from what is called here the forest fire of material existence. And as with the Srimad Bhagavatam, every single verse is very important because it gives us entrance into the whole psychology and understanding, very deep understanding of how this process works. So there is no such a thing of a by the way type of verse. Everything is very deep, every word. So analyzing this verse is actually, it has a lot of important teachings and understandings. And basically it's introducing us to this very important story. Krishna is using this to explain to Uddhava the whole process of Krishna consciousness, from being completely entangled in the fire of material existence to the position of being completely liberated. So, the translation again is, although people within the material world are burning in the forest of fire, in the forest fire of loss and greed, you remain free and are not burned from that fire. You're just like an elephant who takes shelter from a forest fire by standing within the waters of the Ganges River. Kama Lova Davagnina, the forest fire of loss and greed. So, as we go into the story of the Avanti Brahmana, we come to understand what exactly is the forest fire of material existence, because it's a term that we use very much in our prayers, in our daily sadhana. During Mongol Arati, we take we praise the spiritual master by saying Sansara Dhava Nada Lila Loka, that the spiritual master is an agent that actually extinguishes the fire of material existence. It's like a rain cloud, the mercy of the spiritual master. And when we recite the Shikshastaka prayers, Cheto Darpana Marjana Baba Mahadavagni Nirvapanam, that the chanting of the holy names cleanses the heart of all material, unwanted things, and extinguishes the fire of material life of repeated birth and death. So, what exactly is this Davagni, this forest fire? Is very clear. Is almost the theme of the story of the Avanti Brahmana, is to clearly understand what is this. And through the experience of the Avanti Brahmana, in which he is revealing the whole process that he have to go through from being completely caught in that fire all the way to being fully liberated and in a position in which he is not at all touched by that. Perfectly liberated. So we're going to go through that. So the context, as we heard, is Maharaj Jadu is encountering this young Brahmana who is in a form of he's acting, or he's a mendicant, and fully renounced, that it looks completely disconnected from all type of social conventions and duties or anything like that. So he encounters this Brahmana, fully renounced, but he becomes astonished because he noticed something on this Brahmana. So he noticed that the Brahmana is very young, is very attractive, physically attractive, and is fully capable of enjoying his senses. But externally, he appears detached, he appears peaceful, and unaffected by loss. So these two things are very uncommon. So the king questions the Brahmana because he sees a contradiction. And, it's an astonishing contradiction, because in the height of the capacity to enjoy the world that you have, that someone may have, to see this person perfectly and peacefully renounced is very, very rare. So the king asks, how is it possible that you are not burning in the same fire that consumes everyone else in this world? Or how is that possible? So the Brahmana, the Avanti Brahmana, goes on to explain actually that how his life became the process, how he got from to the point that he is now perfectly, peacefully renounced and not affected by the pushes of loss and greed that burns everybody else like that. So the catching thing that we're going to discover, because when we talk about is a much more defined, it's a much more specific definition of the fire of material existence. Is loss and greed is mentioned. Loss and greed. Let me see here. Kama Lova Davagnina. The forest fire of loss and greed. So that's very significant because it's not an external fire. It's not something that is caused externally, but it's something that is internally. Loss is something that comes from, it's explained, it's from the mind. Arjuna, Krishna tells Arjuna that loss is the greatest enemy, and loss have its headquarters in the mind and also have posts in the senses. But the mind is the main headquarter of loss and greed. So these are internal. So in reality, this forest fire happens internally. It's an internal forest fire. And then the life of the Avanti Brahmana and his realization through the whole process of understanding his own experience, his process of introspection is going to be shared here through this whole story. It's a long story, but it's going to be wonderfully shared. So, you know, to appreciate the depth of the question, it's nice to get an overview of the Avanti Brahmana's earlier life. We're gonna hear that, but you know, I can just to put it in context in this class. The Bhagavatam described that he was very wealthy in his earlier life. He was wealthy, very intelligent, sharp, but he was extremely miserly and greedy. So he had that sort of unwanted qualification. He was miserly and greedy. His entire life revolved around wealth, the accumulation of wealth. So because of that wealth that he accumulated through his intelligence, he was very suspicious of others. He was harsh towards family members, and when you talk about miserly, he was unwilling to spend even for proper duties. So instead of happiness, the wealth is this description he's going to give to Maharaj Yadu. Instead of happiness, the wealth what produced was anxiety, fear, and isolation. He gradually became more and more isolated in his life. And eventually, like anything, the whole thing collapsed. The whole thing collapsed for him through thieves, through misfortune, through social pressures, and the whole wealth disappeared. And you know, in the beginning of this experience for this Brahmana, the whole thing was catastrophic. I mean, it was very shocking for him. But as he came to understand later, and from the perspective of the Bhagavatam, in reality, this was divine mercy. And he came to understand that. It's a good lesson for us devotees because, you know, the material things that we may enjoy will come in the different forms, you know, in the forms of a particular gift or a particular arrangement that we're given we may be expert at doing something, or we may gain a particular position, or we may gain certain respect in the society of devotee, and we may be recognized because of a particular ability. And if that is, if that's sort of not, if we don't take care of addressing the unwanted things from within the heart, then it will come to that too. It will come to have these anxieties, or these fears, or these situations in which, one may find oneself more and more isolated. I think His Holiness Ramapa Swami was giving recently this seminar on Vaishnava etiquette, focused on the culture of respect, and the biggest detriment, is what you say, of deterrent for respect was envy from within the heart. And the results of envy will be something similar to this, that at the end causes the practitioner, the devotee, to start to become isolated. And eventually the whole thing will collapse. And when that happens, one can understand that as divine mercy for the devotees. So the Avanti Brahmana was fortunate to be able to see that through introspection. So he had a turning point through self-reflection. So he was able to realize that my entire life has been wasted pursuing wealth that never brought peace to him. He came to that realization. So he observed how greed has poisoned his relationships and agitated his mind. So this internal process, this reflection, gave rise to the detachment. And he abandoned his previous life and became a wandering mendicant. It's like a sannyas. Well, no, actually, like a wandering mendicant. And it was nothing to do, his renunciation was not something idealistic or romantic, nor something to achieve respect. No, it was the genuine result of coming to realize through internal process that actually what he was pursuing, the source of what he believed was the source of happiness, was not. And he was not peaceful. So how his renunciation became to the point, to the level that came to be when Maharaj Jadu encountered him, is because that renunciation was tested. And how it was tested? By the constant humiliation and insult that he have to go through. I mean, the narrations of the insults and the humiliation that he received for people in general who didn't understand his position was quite something, severe. So he was mocked, he was cheated, he was insulted, humiliated, attacked, but he tolerated and remained peaceful everything very peacefully. He remained. So that stage of being capable of doing that is that shows that that test that he was able to pass peacefully and gracefully is what shows, that he was able to achieve. It was a deep, genuine renunciation. When you're able to tolerate these things, that's a test. So Maharaj Yadu encountered him, and then now is asking me, how is it possible? And the whole theme is going to be centered in the psychological revelation of the Avanti Brahmana, which have to do with the mind, addressing the whole situation of the mind being the center of all the miseries that we have to go through in this life. And the mind being it's almost like the battlefield, because is the mind that you have to address, is the mind that you have to actually being able to strategically combat these elements that are there situated very strongly. So through this experience, the Brahmana reached this profound insight about the nature of suffering. So what is the nature of suffering? And is declared in so many places in the Bhagavad Gita by Krishna and throughout the scriptures. But he himself eventually, later in the story, he's gonna give the reason. And he says this is in chapter 23, verse 44. He said to Maharaj Yadu, neither people, the demigods, the body, planets, karma, nor time are the cause of happiness and distress. The mind alone is the cause of the cycle of material life. This is quite something. The mind alone. And that's something that is, there's nothing external about it. So the Brahmana realized that the problem is not the world. The problem was the mind's attachments and identification. So this insight is central to the whole Uddhava Gita psychology of the mind. The whole teachings of the Uddhava Gita, well, we would say the whole teachings, as Krishna spans very much. But of this story of the Avanti Brahmana is the psychology of the mind. This is what we're going to go through. And we have to keep this in mind to actually really study it carefully and learn carefully how I can also direct my attention to this internal process of addressing the mind, and try not to get distracted by all the external things that are there. The fire is happening inside. The sources of all unhappiness, dissatisfaction, all the things, distress, all the things is caused alone by the mind. It's quite something. Yeah. So the mind is the cause of bondage and liberation. This is a concept that is there. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, 6th chapter, the mind can be your friend or can be your enemy. In chapter 14, in the same story, the Brahmanas say the mind absorbs in sense objects becomes bound. But the same mind absorbed in me, well, this is actually Krishna telling Uddhava, the same mind absorbed in me becomes liberated. So the key for us practitioners, sadhakas, that are dealing still with purification process is to be able to address the mind. So bondage comes from the mind's relationship with those objects, with the objects of the senses. When the mind becomes absorbed in loss, greed, competition, envy, then life becomes a constant agitation. So the Avanti Brahmana discover the true battlefield of a spiritual life is in the mind. And that's a message for us. That's where the true battle is. I mean, outside, there's a lot of trouble out there. There's battles, being fought in so many different parts of the world. There's divisions, there's conflicts, there are all kinds of things. Nowadays it's being like really quite something. But for us, or for everyone, is to understand that the real battle is inside the individual. And if we can understand that is a process of Krishna consciousness, to purify the mind. It's a process of yoga, to be able to control the mind, to purify it. And then from there, then you can start to peacefully go on in the service of the Lord, because you become free. You become free from that fire. The succession of things Lord Chaitanya explains in the Shikshastaka one, that he says the first thing that happens is that you come to cleanse the mirror of the heart. And when you cleanse the mirror of the heart, meaning the mind, then the forest fire of material existence becomes extinguished. What happens when the forest fire becomes extinguished within the heart, the mind? Then Sreya Vakairava Kanchandrika, the lotus flower of devotion, opens within the heart. And then knowledge, transcendental knowledge, becomes fully manifested. Shreya Kairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidya Bhathu Jivanam. So Vidya, knowledge, becomes manifested. And then Anandam Buddhi Vardhana Pratipadam Purnam Richa Swadanam, an ocean of transcendental bliss, happiness. So that's how the thing is. That's what the process is. So for us, the means of that process, that what Lord Chaitanya is giving us, is a Sankirtan Yagya. Param Vijayate Sri Krishna Sankirtanam. The chanting of the holy name and facilitating others to chant the holy name. So these two things. So it's important for us to understand this metaphor of the forest fire. Davagnina, Davagnina, Davagnina. So the forest fire of loss and greed. So why compared to a forest fire? Well, in general, it's explained that no one causes it. it just come by itself. It's unintentionally caused in general, these forest fires. Some thunder hits, a tree, the tree sparks. If it's dry, if there's some dry element, then poof, big forest fire. So suddenly this large forest fire is happening. So similarly, material life arises naturally from desire, from attachments, from competition, from envy, from all these things that are there that are part of conditional life. So if we're conditioned, there's going to be fires, coming. It's what it is. So then, if we don't pay attention to that, then it becomes uncontrollable. And when a forest fire is happening, there's no, you can send the fire department. You can control it when it's one of those big ones. This has been happening recently in these last few years. These big fires that happens, in certain places in the country. Can control it. It goes for, long time, no control. The only thing that can put out a forest fire is torrents of rain. If torrents of rain happen. So then that's where the spiritual master is compared. The spiritual master is that cloud that delivers the rain that it will extinguish the fire. So we pray to a spiritual master like that, that the forest fire of material existence is completely extinguished like that. And in this particular verse, the example of the elephant enter into the Ganges. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta sort of explained this image. The elephant, when this in season, when apparently when there is something happened with the elephant that it becomes sexually, it's a time for the elephant, and then the elephant becomes maddened by that, whatever hormones, whatever thing happened in his body that is forcing him to mate. And so when that sexual desire arises in the elephant, so the body becomes fully overheated. That's what is explained. So when the elephant in that condition enters the waters of the Ganges, enters the river, the Ganges River, the cooling waters just cool the body, and then he becomes pacified. So similarly, it is explained that the mind, when it's overheated with lust, will become pacified by the cooling current of transcendental consciousness. So in this verse, the Ganges symbolize the divine spiritual flow. So it's a very nice imagery, that we can think about it, because it's a secret for peace for us. Lust can be hitting anyone in some different ways. It doesn't have to be sexual. It can be in other things. But the fact is that however it hits, it doesn't make you peaceful. It makes you agitated. So the secret for peace is these currents of devotional service. So the Bhagavatam explains that peace does not come from suppressing desire. So it's not about suppressing the thing. It comes from a higher absorption, is this param drishta nivartante, by facilitating something higher. But to get to that facilitating something higher, we also have to do our work too, because, we're given the taste of a gulab jamun or something like that, some burfi, Radha Govinda burfi. We're given something very wonderful. Krishna Archana was yesterday saying of Premananda Prabhu's showing her the pictures of the sandesh that is offered to the deities in New Brajadam in Hungary, that matches the dress. So Leela Manjari also went there, and she brought some of those sweets. So she gave me a piece of one of those sweets. She showed me a sandesh and she gave me a piece of another sweet. I mean, spectacular, but it's spectacular, the sweets. And they're huge. They're like this. It's not like, the sandesh, they're like, this. And they have shapes and things like that. So, spectacular. So you can be given that, but then we'd have to do our work too, and this is what the Avanti Brahmana is going to tell us. Our renunciation, our path is going to be tested. It's going to be tested by sometimes being humiliated, by sometimes being disregarded, by sometimes being this or that, and we have to be steady in renunciation. And the steadiness and renunciation comes from a deep realization that is so internal. The whole thing is happening here. It's not happening outside. So I have to address it, And how do I address it? Well, my Guru Maharaj says, once you feel the agitation, just go and reconnect again with your process of Krishna consciousness. And the process of Krishna consciousness will be, reconnecting will be my intention. If the agitation thing is when I have a particular conception that this is my position, it's all self-centered. My position, what I deserve, what is the term that is used when one's, is expected to have something? Entitlement. I'm entitled to this. This is not just. There's injustice happening here. Unfair. All the things that causes all this agitation is not from outside, it's from inside. It's for the conception that I have that I am in the center and I should be, I'm doing this service, so I should be receiving what is expected. Some respect or some recognition or whatever it is, like that. So we have to do we will find ourselves tested. We will find ourselves tested. And that's part of the work that we have to do. And we have to internalize it. We have to remain peaceful. And the secret of that peace is we disconnect ourselves from the material conception, the material attachment, the material desires. It's not eliminating it. Again, it's not suppressing the desire, but it's disconnecting the material part and putting it more in the context of a spiritual desire. So what is a spiritual desire? What I understand from the training of my spiritual master, it have to do with constantly reviewing what is the motivation that I have. If it's for Krishna, it's for pleasing Guru and Krishna, that's my entire motivation. And I have to, work very carefully on keeping myself on that track. Lord Chaitanya tells in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ata Eva Shanta, which is, about this secret of peace. He say, a devotee of Krishna has no material desires, therefore he's peaceful. So material desires is replaced by devotional desire. And that's is something that is a cultivated practice. In one sense, we are conditioned to pursue our desires. It's just part of the of actually not even condition. It's the essence of the soul is to look for happiness. What is it? Ananda Maya Vyasat. We're naturally looking for happiness. So desires are there in the living entity. Essential, that is part of our essence, is to have desires. But when desires get placed on material things, then that's where the agitation happens. And then that naturally leads to not being peaceful. So the whole process of changing the habit to go for this material, to find our desires being led towards material objects, then we have to get into the habit of changing, you switch them like that. And eventually, we'll find ourselves situated in the same position that this Avanti Brahmana is when he was encountering Maharaj Jadu. So when we are in the position in which the heart is fully satisfied by the loving service of Krishna, that position, ahaitukya pratiyata, no motivation, no interruption. Jayatma suprasidati. Our heart is, our soul, everything is fully satisfied. So this happens. When this happens, the mind naturally becomes peaceful when that stage is like that. So that is the real meaning of liberation. That's what is explained here in the purport. It was written like that this condition is a condition of mukti, of liberation. So liberation does not mean disappearance from the world. It means freedom from the burning agitation of material desires. That's what mukti is. That's what mukti is. Because the liberation of
Yeah, yes, is important. So externally, the Brahmana still works in the world. Externally, there were things happening around him. Externally, there will be people insulting him and mocking him, but internally, there's no fire. The whole thing is gone. So this is a lesson. This is a very important lesson for a spiritual life. Uh, so they believe that suffering comes from circumstances, from other people, for loss, from injustice. Uh, that's what the Bhanti Brahmana is showing us. They discover that of a much more deeper uh, um source. The real source of the suffering is a conditioned mind. That's it. And the real solution is a spiritual transformation of consciousness. And when the mind becomes absorbed in Krishna, the forest fire disappears. So it's a nice conclusion. It's a nice teaching. So while the world burns in the forest fire of material desire, he stands peacefully in the cooling current of transcendental consciousness, like an elephant is standing in the sacred waters of the Ganges. Any comments or questions?
Thank you for your class, Prabhuji. It's such an important class, um, prayerfully to be reviewed. Um, Yesterday, in the class, I was asking Mataji about her thoughts on the statement Prabhupada made about Krishna consciousness is not an imposition on the mind. And so, just wondering, what are your thoughts on, like a person like Arjuna was told, you can't just go to the forest and renounce your Kshatriya nature. You have to fight. And even he ended up being with Lady Subhadra, and um, Prabhupada being married, Pankshatattva being married, Bhaktivinoda Thakur needing a son and being qualified to able to have a son to carry on the movement. Without Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, we wouldn't have Prabhupada. But he came through his marriage and through, you know. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are about keeping it practical and dovetailing and keeping the spiritual master in the center of guiding us.
Yeah, I think what we've been taught is principle. Um, the principle means that something that it will be universally applicable in different circumstances and situations. So regardless in which varna or which position we are, we have to deal with the mind. And we have to deal with the enemies, the unwanted things within the mind, the conditional mind. The universal principle is that the mind, which is absorbed in material sense objects, is a cause of bondage. is the real cause. That's where the thing is. That's where the actual thing is happening. So that regardless if you are a sannyasi, if you're a mendicant, if you're a grihasta, if you're a brahmachari, whatever you are, you have to deal with that. So, so then we of course, a different approach for different people. Some people may have this this situation or that situation, or this particular weakness and this particular weakness, but the principles remains the same. We have to address them as unwanted things. Nashta praeshu abadreshu, the unwanted things within the heart. So the process is a process of purification regardless. It's a process of purification. So we have to get into that. And the process of purification is not going to happen just by mercy. Mercy is there as a most important element, but it requires our effort. So it's both our effort and mercy. That's key. Lord Chaitanya embraced that as part of his teachings, taking it from Ramanujacharya. And the example is that, like Ramanujacharya explained, that we have to be like the baby monkey, which is carried by the mother monkey from point A to point B. So the spiritual master will carry us back home, back to Godhead. But we have the task to hold to the spiritual master. So the little monkey, the baby monkey, you see, is hold with the arms, legs, and tail to the mother, like clink, like that. And then which it takes. Some other philosophy says, just by mercy you'll be taken. And they compare it to the little kitten who is grabbed by the mother cat and then, grabbed by whatever skin here, and then the kitten goes, limp, and then it's taken. He doesn't have to do anything. The mother just take it. But that's not our philosophy. Our philosophy is by mercy and by our effort, both. Our effort is minimal in comparison, but there is effort. You have to be. So our part is that we have to be very much dedicated to following the instructions that the spiritual master has given us to carry out that purification. So that's where the whole thing lies. And that's universal, we have to, it's a very much an internal work. It's again, this is the teaching that we're getting here too. Pay attention. It's all in here. The whole misery, we get so distracted by the whole thing that is happening outside as that causes all kinds of conflicts and miseries, but actually the main thing for us sadhakas is right here. Thank you. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention this real quick because for me it brings about the importance of sadhusanga, because how the whole process of contemplating the objects of the senses and attachment and lust and then forgetfulness, it feels like for me right now, as long as I'm with the devotees, if I fall prey to any of that, at least someone's there to remind me. Because if I'm by myself, I forgot.
Yeah.
Like, what four regulative principles? I don't know.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
You brought up the point that the mendicant Brahmana, reading on ahead, that, and the verse that you read up ahead, was his telling Krishna that he'd realized that all the suffering actually is internal in the mind. So, the mind is going to be the cause of becoming free from that forest fire that means, existing in the material environment. So there's also that, breakdown of the three kinds of sufferings that are there, and one of them is the suffering that's coming from other living entities. So you were describing, that reading up ahead, that, the Avanti Brahmana gets exposed to a lot of abuse from other living entities, seems humans. So, so it's interesting because one would think that, okay, how one processes what's coming externally is what's going to affect the mind. Whether you've seen it as your source of suffering or not. So it seems that there's still a necessity for internal dialogue to some degree. If in the external material atmosphere there's that kind of abuse coming his way, so for the mind to I guess not be agitated, it seems there's still necessity of like a lot of internal dialogue processing.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, the example, I mean, that's why this story is so important to study in one sense. The astonishment of King Jadu have to do with that, because in general, you have to manage and deal the level of dealing with the sources of miseries that come from others. And to be able to be peaceful, then that's another level of, to be peaceful in the midst of all those miseries, that's another level. That's a level that was astonishing to Maharaj Yadu. And the key, or the key for that, to reach that level, is that the whole attention goes into internally the mind. So because he was able to extinguish the whole thing within the mind and switch the desires, the attachments towards devotional, towards spiritual, then everything else becomes now, he's not touched by that. And that's a real position of liberation, of transcendence from misery. So that's the whole teaching. So in reality, it's, telling us, bring your attention into controlling, making the mind free from these things. And then, we can achieve that position of liberation. So
I think it's quite something. You have any other thought? Okay. Thank you. Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.